A silver-gray wolf emerged from the shadows, its amber eyes fixed not with predatory intent, but with an almost human urgency. For 3 consecutive days, the same wolf approached the ranger station, defying natural instinct and centuries of evolutionary caution around humans. What Ranger Benjamin Hayes discovered when he finally followed the persistent creature into the remote wilderness wasn't just an injured photographer clinging to life at the bottom of a ravine. It was the beginning of a revelation that would shake the foundations of an entire community. The miraculous rescue of Oliver Turner sparked more than just headlines. It ignited a fierce battle between those who saw only danger in the wild and those who recognized something profound in the wolf's impossible act of music. Compassion, quick pause before we continue. Tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit subscribe because tomorrow's episode is absolutely mind-blowing. Benjamin Hayes has spent nearly 2 decades as a ranger at Evergreen National Park. His weathered face and steady gaze a testament to countless seasons in the wilderness. The ranger station's early morning quiet was broken only by the gentle tapping of his pencil against a logbook as he recorded the previous day's wildlife sightings. Another quiet night, he muttered to himself, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. The tall windows framed the majestic pines and rugged peaks that had become more home to him than the modest cabin where he slept. The door swung open, bringing with it a gust of pine-scent air, and Julia Foster, whose practical approach to rangering had made her Benjamin's most trusted colleague. "Morning, Ben, you're here early," she said, hanging her jacket on a wooden peg by the door. "Couldn't sleep, thought I'd get a head start on the reports." Julia poured herself coffee from the pot that perpetually brewed in the corner. "Anything interesting?" "Just the usual couple of bear sightings near the North Trail, some elk movement patterns changing with the warmer weather." Benjamin closed the logbook, stretching his arms overhead. "Oh, and that wolf was back yesterday evening, 3rd time this week." Julia's expression shifted from casual to concern. "The same one, the gray with the scar over its right eye. That's the one stood at the edge of the clearing for almost an hour this time, just watching. That's not normal behavior, Ben. Wolves don't hang around humans unless something's wrong." Before Benjamin could respond, the radio crackled to life. Richard Nelson's gruff voice cut through the static bass. "This is Nelson. Got a report from hikers about abandoned camping equipment near Eagle Ridge. Might be nothing, but worth checking out." Benjamin reached for the radio copy. "That Richard, any signs of distress?" "Negative, just a tent. And some gear, looks like it's been there a couple days." "All right, log the coordinates. I'll swing by on my patrol." The day proceeded with the familiar rhythm of park duties, checking trails, assisting visitors, and monitoring wildlife activity. By late afternoon, Benjamin had made his way to Eagle Ridge, where he found the abandoned campsite. Just as Richard had described, the tent, a high-end model designed for serious outdoor photographers, contained expensive camera equipment and several memory cards labeled Wolfpack documentation. "Someone left in a hurry," Benjamin murmured, examining the cold fire pit. Nestled between rocks was a worn journal, its pages filled with detailed observations about wolf behavior and several stunning sketches of the pack that roamed the north sector of the park. The final entry, dated 3 days earlier, read, "Close encounter with the alpha female. Today, remarkable intelligence in her eyes. Will attempt to photograph the den site tomorrow at dawn." Benjamin carefully packed the journal and the essential equipment into his backpack. As he secured the sight, the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. That distinct feeling of being watched. Turning slowly, he found himself looking into the amber eyes of the same wolf that had been appearing near the station. The animal stood about 50 yards away, its silvery coat catching the late afternoon sunlight. Unlike most wolves who would retreat a human presence, this one held its ground, ears, forward gaze unwavering. "Hey there," Benjamin said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "What's your story?" The wolf took several steps forward, then stopped, looking back over its shoulder before turning its gaze to Benjamin. The behavior was so deliberate, it almost seemed like the animal was trying to communicate, "You want me to follow you?" Is that it? Benjamin knew talking to wildlife was irrational, but something about this encounter felt different from any in his long career. The wolf moved a few more paces, then paused again, looking back expectantly against all protocol, and his better judgment Benjamin began to follow. "I must be losing my mind," he muttered, radioing Julia to inform her of his location and intentions. "You're doing what?" Julia's voice crackled through the radio, disbelief evident in her tone. "I know how it sounds, but there's something odd about this wolf, and with that abandoned campsite belonging to a wildlife photographer who was tracking wolves." "Benjamin, you know the protocol." We don't follow predators into the wilderness on a hunch. I'm keeping a safe distance. If I'm not back or haven't checked within 2 hours, send Richard to these coordinates. This is a terrible idea, Julia. 2 hours, Ben, then I'm sending the cavalry. The wolf led Benjamin along game trails that wound deeper into less traveled sections of the park. As they moved, Benjamin noticed signs of the wolf's passage from previous days, paw prints were caught on branches, and occasionally deliberate markings that wolves used to signal their territory. The terrain grew increasingly difficult as they ascended into rocky outcroppings rarely visited by hikers. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the landscape. Benjamin checked his watch. He had less than an hour before Julia would send out a search party. The wolf suddenly quickened its pace, disappearing over a ridge. When Benjamin reached the same spot, he found himself at the edge of a steep ravine. The wolf stood on a narrow ledge about 30 foot down. Its attention focused on something below. Benjamin carefully moved to a better vantage point and saw what had drawn the wolf's interest. A man lay crumpled at the bottom of the ravine, his body partly hidden by fallen rocks and debris. A professional camera with a long lens lay shattered nearby. Hello, Benjamin called down. Can you hear me? A faint groan rose from below. Benjamin immediately radioed for emergency assistance. Julia, I need a medical evacuation team and my coordinates immediately. I found an injured hiker at the bottom of a ravine approximately 100 foot down from my position. He's alive, but appears seriously injured. Copy. The helicopter and rescue team are being dispatched. ETA 45 minutes. What's your situation? I'm going to attempt to reach him. The wolf. Julia, you're not going to believe this. The wolf led me straight to him. Be careful, Ben. That ravine system is treacherous. Using his emergency gear, Benjamin carefully made his descent. The wolf watched from its perch, making no move to either approach or retreat. When Benjamin finally reached the injured man, he found him semi-conscious with multiple lacerations, a clearly broken leg, and signs of dehydration. Sir, can you hear me? I'm Ranger Benjamin Hayes. Help is on the way. The man's eyes fluttered open, revealing a startling clarity. Despite his condition, the wolf, he whispered, is she still there? Benjamin glanced up to where the wolf continued its vigilant watch. Yes, right up there. She led me to you. A weak smile crossed the man's cracked lips. Mystic, I knew she would. His voice was barely audible. I've been documenting her pack for months. Must have slipped looking for den site. Save your strength, Benjamin urged, administering first aid, while keeping a watchful eye on the wolf. Above, what's your name? Oliver Turner. As Benjamin worked to stabilize Oliver's injuries, he couldn't shake the extraordinary nature of what had transpired. The wolf Mystic, as Oliver had called her, had deliberately sought human help for a person in distress behavior that defied conventional understanding of wolf cognition. The rescue helicopter arrived just as the light was fading, its powerful searchlight illuminating the ravine. The medical team worked efficiently to secure Oliver onto a stretcher while Benjamin explained the remarkable circumstances of the rescue. He said he knows the wolf. Benjamin told the lead paramedic called her by name. Fever can cause delusions. The paramedic replied dismissively. He's severely dehydrated and has been exposed to the elements for what looks like days. As they prepared to airlift Oliver out of the ravine, Benjamin looked for Mystic, but the wolf had vanished into the gathering darkness. Only when a helicopter was ascending with its precious cargo did Benjamin glimpse the silver form watching from a distant ridge, silhouetted against the last light of day. Back at the ranger station, Benjamin faced the skepticism of his colleagues as he recounted the day's events. So you're telling us a wolf basically played Lassie? Richard Nelson leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed over his chest. I know how it sounds, Benjamin replied, but I saw it with my own eyes. That wolf has been trying to get our attention for days, and today she led me straight to an injured hiker who apparently has been studying her pack. There could be a rational explanation, Julia offered. Maybe the wolf was just curious about the human scent, and you interpreted it as leading you. The photographer knew the wolf's name. Julia called her Mystic without me mentioning anything about a wolf. Sheriff Robert Campbell, who had arrived to take a report on the incident, cleared his throat. Whatever happened out there, you saved a man's life. Hayes, the hospital reports he wouldn't have survived another night. How is he? Benjamin asked. Stable but critical, multiple fractures, internal bleeding, severe dehydration. They're transferring him to Woodland Hills Regional for surgery tonight. Benjamin nodded, gathering his things. I need to check on him, and I want to look through his journal again. There might be something that explains the wolf's behavior. As Benjamin drove toward the hospital, the events of the day replayed in his mind. In all his years as a ranger, he had never witnessed anything like it wolves were. Intelligent, yes, but this level of apparent empathy and communication transcended anything documented in wildlife. Studies a small regional hospital buzz with activity as Benjamin approached the nurse's station. "I'm Ranger Hayes. I brought in a hiker from Evergreen National Park. Earlier, the nurse looked up Mr. Turner. Is in surgery. Now should be another hour. At least you're welcome to wait, if you like." Benjamin settled into the waiting area, pulling out Oliver's journal. He thumb-read through the pages, admiring the detailed observations and exquisite sketches. Oliver was clearly no amateur. His notes reflected years of study and a deep understanding of wolf behavior. About halfway through the journal, Benjamin found a series of entries about a wolf rehabilitation project from 3 years earlier. The pages included photographs of a younger Oliver working with injured wolves at a sanctuary called Wolf Haven 1. Photo in particular caught Benjamin's attention. Oliver cradling a young wolf pup with distinctive amber eyes and a small scar over its right eye. The caption read, "MSDIC 6 months old rescued after poachers killed her mother. Her recovery has been remarkable, but her unusual comfort with humans concerns some of the staff." William insists she'll always remember those who helped her. Benjamin stared at the photograph, the pieces falling into place. The wolf that had led him to Oliver wasn't just any wolf. She was one he had helped save years earlier, and somehow against all conventional wisdom about wild animal behavior, she had remembered as night settled over Woodland Hills. Benjamin Hayes sat in the quiet hospital corridor holding a journal that contained the first pieces of what would prove to be an extraordinary story, one that would challenge everything he thought he knew about the relationship between humans and the wild. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The hospital waiting room's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across Benjamin's tired face as he studied the photograph of a younger Oliver with the wolf pup. 3 years had passed since that image was captured, yet Mystic had not only recognized Oliver, but had sought human help specifically for him. The implications were staggering. Ranger Hayes, a doctor in surgical scrubs, approached her. Expression, "You guarded, I'm doctor. Laura Peterson, you brought in Mr. Turner." Benjamin stood quickly. "Yes." "How is he?" "Stable for now. He had extensive internal bleeding, a compound fracture of the right femur, 3 broken ribs, and severe dehydration. If you'd found him even a few hours later." She let the sentence hang, its meaning clear. "Can I speak with him?" Dr. Peterson shook her head. "He's heavily sedated and will be for at least 24 hours. Are you able to contact his family?" "I'm working on it." Found some contact information in his belongings. Benjamin hesitated. "Doctor, when he was briefly conscious during the rescue, he recognized the wolf that led me to him, called her by name." The doctor raised an eyebrow. "My experienced trauma victims often experience confusion. I wouldn't put too much stock in anything." He said, "This wasn't confusion." Benjamin insisted, showing her the photograph from the journal. "He's worked with this wolf before years ago. Somehow she recognized him and sought help." Dr. Peterson studied the image, her skepticism evident. "I'm a woman of science, Ranger Hayes. While I can't explain what happened out there, I'm sure there's a rational explanation that doesn't involve a wolf with human-like reasoning." As the doctor walked away, Benjamin's phone vibrated with a text from Julia. "News about the rescue is spreading. Sheriff wants statement. Media calling. Call me SCP." The following morning, Benjamin arrived at a ranger station to find it buzzing with unusual activity. Julia met him at the door, coffee in hand. "You become quite the local celebrity overnight," she said, nodding toward a small group of reporters gathered near the parking area. "What happened?" "Someone from hospital staff leaked the story. Wolf leads ranger to injured photographer," is a headline on the local news site. Benjamin groaned. "Perfect. That's not all." Julia continued, lowering her voice. I wouldn't put too much stock in anything." He said, "This wasn't confusion." Benjamin insisted, showing her the photograph from the journal. "He's worked with this wolf before years ago. Somehow she recognized him and sought help." Dr. Peterson studied the image, her skepticism evident. "I'm a woman of science, Ranger Hayes. While I can't explain what happened out there, I'm sure there's a rational explanation that doesn't involve a wolf with human-like reasoning." As the doctor walked away, Benjamin's phone vibrated with a text from Julia. "News about the rescue is spreading. Sheriff wants statement. Media calling. Call me to P." The following morning, Benjamin arrived at the ranger station to find it buzzing with unusual activity. Julia met him at the door, coffee in hand. "You become quite the local celebrity overnight," she said, nodding toward a small group of reporters gathered near the parking area. "What happened?" Someone from the hospital staff leaked the story Wolf leads ranger to injured photographer is the headline on the local news site Benjamin Grown Perfect. That's not all, Julia continued, lowering her voice. I got a call from someone named William Callahan, says he runs Wolf Haven Sanctuary and knows Oliver Turner. He's driving up from Cedar Ridge today. Benjamin's eyes widened. That's the sanctuary mentioned in Oliver's journal where Mystic was rehabilitated inside. Richard was fielding phone calls with visible irritation. No, we don't have any official statement about a hero wolf. Yes, a hiker was rescued yesterday. Sheriff Gamble stood by the wall map, his expression stern. Ace, we need to talk about this media circus you create. I didn't call any reporters, Sheriff, maybe not. But your wolf story is spreading like wildfire. The mayor's concerned about public safety. If people think there's a friendly wolf out there, some idiots going to try to find it and get themselves killed before Benjamin could respond. The door opened, and a slender woman in her early 40s entered. Her sharp gaze surveyed the room before settling on Benjamin. I'm looking for Ranger Benjamin Hayes, she announced, her voice clipped and professional. That's me, Elizabeth Turner, Oliver's sister. I understand you're the one who found him. Benjamin extended his hand. Yes, ma'am. He's at Woodland Hills Regional. I'm aware. I just came from there. Her composed demeanor cracked slightly. The doctors said he wouldn't have survived another night if you hadn't found him. They also mentioned something about a wolf. Benjamin offered her a chair and explained the extraordinary circumstances of the rescue, showing her the photograph from Oliver's journal. Elizabeth listened without interruption, her expression gradually shifting from skepticism to wonder. That sounds like Ollie, she finally said, a hint of fondness breaking through her professional facade. Always insisting animals understand more than we give them credit for. You don't seem surprised. Elizabeth smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her skirt. My brother and I haven't spoken in 3 years, but I followed his work. He's dedicated his life to documenting wolf behavior, particularly their intelligence and social structures. She hesitated. Our parents were wildlife biologists. Their research focused on predator-prey relationships and conservation. They passed that passion to Oliver, though I chose law instead. Environmental law, according to your business card. Benjamin noted. A slight smile touched Elizabeth's lips. The apple doesn't fall far. I suppose I fight for conservation in courtrooms while Ollie fights with his camera. In the field, the conversation was interrupted when Richard called over. Hayes, you've got another visitor. Says he's from some wolf sanctuary. William Callahan was a weatherman in his 60s with kind eyes and callous hands that spoke of a lifetime of physical work. Upon seeing Elizabeth, his face lit with recognition. Lizzie Turner. Good Lord, it's been years. Elizabeth rose, genuine warmth replacing her guarded demeanor. William, the first, didn't know you'd be here. When I heard what happened to Oliver and about the wolf. William turned to Benjamin. You're the ranger who followed Mystic. The conversation moved to a quiet corner of the station where William explained his history with the Turners. I worked with Margaret and John Oliver and Elizabeth's parents for years on wolf conservation initiatives. After they passed, Oliver threw himself into continuing their research and Mystic. Benjamin asked. William's weathered face softened. She was special from the beginning, part of litter we rescued after poachers killed the mother. Most rehabilitated wolves keep their distance from humans, even their caretakers. But Mystic was different. She formed a strong bond with Oliver. Too strong, Elizabeth interjected. That was the argument between Oliver and the sanctuary board. Wasn't it whether she could ever be truly wild again? William nodded. Oliver insisted she could adapt, but maintain her unique perspective. A wolf that understood humans could be a bridge between our world and ambassador of sorts. So what happened? Benjamin asked. 3 years ago, we released Mystic's pack into this region of evergreen olive, tracked them for the first year to document their adaptation. The pack thrived, established territory. Mystic even became the alpha female. But you lost touch with Oliver. Benjamin pressed. Elizabeth and William exchanged glances. My brother and I had a falling out. Elizabeth admitted about the sanctuary, about our parents' legacy. I thought his approach was too idealistic, too personal. He thought my legal work was too slow, too compromising. While they spoke, the activity at the station increased. As the morning shift rangers prepared for their patrols, Sheriff Campbell approached their group, his expression grim. Hayes, we got a situation. Mayor's called an emergency town meeting for this evening to address public concerns about the wolf story. She wants you there. What concerns? Benjamin asked. This should be celebrated, not feared. Not everyone shares your enthusiasm for wolves mingling with humans. Local ranchers are already demanding increased protection. Some residents are worried about their safety after the sheriff left. William leaned forward. This is exactly what Oliver's been fighting against, fear overshadowing understanding. The timing couldn't be worse. Elizabeth added. Oliver recently told me he'd uncovered evidence of illegal hunting in the northern section of the park. He suspected someone was specifically targeting Mystic's pack. Benjamin straightened. He never reported anything to us. He would not, without concrete proof. That's likely what he was doing when he fell trying to document the poaching operation. Before they could discuss further, Julia rushed over Ben Hospital, called Oliver's awake, and asking for the hospital room was dim when Benjamin arrived with Elizabeth and William. Oliver lay propped against pillows, his face pale, but alert. His leg was elevated in a cast, and various monitors beeped steadily around him. The wolf whisper awakens Benjamin, said gently. Oliver's face brightened despite his obvious pain. The ranger who listens to wolves. Seems we were destined to meet. His voice was weak, but determined. Mystic found you. I knew she would. You remember what happened? Oliver nodded. Pieces. I was tracking the pack, trying to locate their new den site. The light was perfect that morning. A shadow crossed his face, but I found something else instead. Evidence of trapping, illegal snares set specifically along the pack's known routes. That's when you fell? Elizabeth asked, moving to her brother's side. Oliver's eyes widened at her presence. Lizzie, you're here? His voice cracked with emotion. Of course I'm here, you idiot. The professional facade completely disappeared as Elizabeth gently took her brother's hand. You nearly died. Oliver squeezed her hand. Weakly, I was photographing the snare locations when I heard voices move too quickly on unstable ground. He winced at the memory. The fall knocked me unconscious. When I came, I couldn't move, couldn't reach my emergency beacon. But Mystic found you. William said. A smile touched Oliver's cracked lips. She appeared on the ledge above me the first night. I thought I was hallucinating. She kept coming back, watching. I told her it could help. He laughed. Weakly sounds crazy talking to a wolf. Not crazy at all, Benjamin replied. She understood. She led me right to you. Oliver's expression grew serious. She remembers Benjamin. That's what my latest research has been focused on. Wolf memory and recognition. Their capacity for complex social understanding goes beyond what science has acknowledged. He struggled to sit up straighter, but now the pack is in danger. The poachers easy. Elizabeth soothed. You need to recover first. There's no time, Oliver insisted. If they've set snares throughout the territory, Mystic and the others could be killed. Everything I've worked for, everything Mom and Dad worked for. Gone. A nurse entered, frowning at the animated conversation. Mr. Turner needs rest. You'll have to continue this later. Outside in the hallway, Benjamin, Elizabeth, and William huddled together. He's right about the urgency, Benjamin said. There are illegal snares in the park. We need to find them. This could be why Mystic approached the ranger station in the first place. William suggested if the pack's territory was being invaded, she might have been seeking help even before Oliver's accident. Elizabeth's attorney mind was already racing. We need documentation of any illegal activity, enough evidence for me to secure an emergency injunction against anyone hunting in the park's northern section. Benjamin checked his watch. The town meeting is in 3 hours. If the public sentiment turns against the wolves based on fear and misinformation, it will be that much harder to protect them. I'll stay with Oliver. William offered you to handle the meeting. We need voices of reason. There's Benjamin and Elizabeth prepared to leave. Dr. Peterson approached with Oliver's personal effects. His phone's damaged, but his camera's memory card might be salvageable, she said, handing Benjamin a plastic bag. Also, he keeps asking about Mystic. For his recovery, it might help if you can provide updates about this wolf he's so concerned about in the parking lot. Elizabeth suddenly stopped. I have a thought. Those memory cards from Oliver's campsite. Have you reviewed them? Not yet. They might contain the evidence we need. If we could present concrete proof of poaching at the town meeting, it would shift the conversation from fear to conservation. Benjamin nodded. Let's head to the station and check them before the meeting. As they drove, Elizabeth grew quiet, lost in thought. Something on your mind? Benjamin asked. It's been 3 years since I've spoken to my brother. She admitted. 3 years of silence because of philosophical disagreement about conservation approaches. And now a wolf with an extraordinary memory has reminded me that some bonds transcend time and misunderstanding. Elizabeth stared out at the passing forest. Mystic remembered Oliver after years in the wild. Meanwhile, I let 3 years of stubbornness keep me from my only family. Back at the ranger station, Benjamin and Elizabeth reviewed the memory cards from Oliver's equipment. Among the stunning wildlife photographs were several images documenting illegal snare locations, including GPS coordinates and timestamps. Most disturbing were images of men in camouflage setting traps along known wolf trails. This is definitely illegal activity, Benjamin confirmed. Those snare types are prohibited, and they're clearly targeting predator paths. can you identify any of these men?" Elizabeth asked, studying the images. Benjamin frowned at one particular photo. "This one looks familiar." He enlarged the image. "That's George Winters. He runs hunting expeditions out of Woodland Hills, claims to keep everything legal and ethical. These photos suggest otherwise." Elizabeth's professional demeanor returned as she organized the evidence. "This should be enough to present at the meeting and file for emergency protective action." By evening, the Woodland Hills Community Center was packed with concerned citizens. Mayor Deborah Lawrence stood at the podium, flanked by Sheriff Campbell and several town council members. The crowd's murmuring quieted as she began. "We've called this meeting to address concerns about the wolf situation in Evergreen National Park. As you've heard, a wolf apparently led a ranger to an injured hiker yesterday. While we're all grateful for the rescue, this incident raises questions about public safety." Benjamin sat with Elizabeth in the front row, the evidence from Oliver's memory cards loaded onto a tablet between them as the mayor continued outlining concerns. Benjamin noticed George Winters sitting with a group of men near the back, their expressions grim. "I'd now like to invite Ranger Benjamin Hayes to share his first-hand account of yesterday's events." The mayor concluded. Benjamin approached the podium, aware of the diverse reactions in the audience, from curiosity to outright hostility. "Yesterday, I witnessed something remarkable." He began. "A wolf, a creature we've been taught to fear, demonstrated intelligence and compassion that challenges our understanding of wildlife. She didn't just lead me to an injured man by chance. She sought help specifically for someone who had once helped her." Murmurs rippled through the crowd as Benjamin shared the details of Oliver's connection to Mystic and the Wolf Haven Sanctuary. He carefully avoided any anthropomorphizing, sticking to observable facts, while emphasizing the scientific significance of such behavior. "But there's more to this story." He continued, his gaze settling briefly on George Winters. The injured photographer Oliver Turner was in that remote section of the park documenting illegal poaching activity specifically targeting the wolf pack. That includes Mystic. The crowd erupted as Benjamin displayed Oliver's photographs on the large screen, clear images of illegal snares, and the men setting them caused Sheriff Campbell to straighten in his seat. "These images show prohibited hunting practices in protected areas of the park." Benjamin explained, "This isn't just about one remarkable wolf. It's about upholding the law and protecting a keystone species that maintains the health of our entire ecosystem." Elizabeth stood next, introducing herself as both Oliver's sister and an environmental attorney. Her clear, measured explanation of the legal violations and conservation implications added weight to Benjamin's emotional appeal. From the back of the room, George Winters shouted, "Those wolves kill livestock. They're a menace to ranchers trying to make a living. There hasn't been a confirmed wolf predation of livestock in this county in 5 years. Mr. Winters," Benjamin countered, "the Park Service compensates for any verified losses. The compensation doesn't cover the real costs." Another voice called out. Mayor Lawrence attempted to restore order as the meeting devolved into competing shouts. Eventually, she established a system for citizens to speak, in turn revealing the deep division within the community. Those who viewed the wolves as dangerous predators versus those who recognized their ecological importance. As the meeting stretched into its second hour, a commotion at the back of the hall drew everyone's attention. William Callahan entered, supporting a pale but determined Oliver in a wheelchair. Despite the doctor's orders, Oliver had insisted on attending. The room fell silent as William wheeled Oliver to front. Despite his obvious pain, Oliver's voice carried clearly through the hall. "I've dedicated my life to understanding these magnificent creatures." He began. "What happened to me, what Mystic did, isn't a fluke or a fairy tale. It's evidence of cognitive abilities we're only beginning to understand." He paused, gathering strength. "But right now, the pack that includes this remarkable wolf is being systematically targeted by illegal hunting. I nearly died trying to document it. Are we going to let fear and misinformation destroy what we should be studying and protecting?" The simple dignity of Oliver's presence, his injured body testament to his commitment, shifted the energy in the room. Even those who had spoken against the wolves seemed moved by his obvious passion and sacrifice. As the meeting concluded, Sheriff Campbell approached George Winters and his companions. "I'll need to speak with you gentlemen about these photographs," he said, firmly nodding toward his deputies outside the community center beneath a sky brilliant with stars. Benjamin stood with the Turner siblings and William Callahan. "What happens now?" Benjamin asked. "I filed for emergency protective action first thing tomorrow," Elizabeth replied. "With this evidence, we should get immediate increased patrol of the northern section and a suspension of all hunting permits in the buffer zone." Oliver, exhausted but satisfied, looked toward the distant mountains. And I need to heal quickly. The pack needs documentation more than ever, especially Mysticer's story could change how the world views these animals one step at a time, Brother Elizabeth said gently. First you recover, then we figure out how to protect your wolves. As they spoke, Benjamin noticed a figure approaching from across the parking lot. Julia, her expression urgent. Ben, we just got reports from the Northridge Fire Tower multiple gunshots heard in the restricted area near where you found Oliver. Benjamin's heart sank. The poachers must have heard about the meeting. They're accelerating their operation. Before we can stop them, Oliver straightened in his wheelchair, his face pale. But determined, Mystics pack, I'll organize an immediate patrol, Benjamin said, already reaching for his phone. Julia, get Richard and the night shift team. As the others mobilized, Oliver reached for Benjamin's arm. Mystics saved my life, he said, his voice breaking. Now we need to save her. As the night air carried a biting chill as Benjamin assembled an emergency response team in the ranger station parking lot. Floodlights cast long shadows across the determined faces of rangers preparing for an unusual midnight operation. Julia checked equipment, while Richard distributed maps marked with the locations from Oliver's photographs. Will break into three at teams, Benjamin instructed, his breath visible in the cold. Team 1 covers the eastern section, where most of the snares were documented. Team 2 takes the ridge line above the ravine. Team 3 searches the valley floor where the den site is likely located. Sheriff Campbell arrived with 4 deputies, their expressions somber. We got arrest warrants for Winters and his associates based on the photographic evidence, he announced. But my men aren't trained for night operations and backcountry. Stick with the ranger teams, Benjamin advised. We know the terrain. Elizabeth emerged from her car, now dressed in hiking clothes. I'm coming too. That's not advisable, Benjamin began. It wasn't a question, she interrupted. Those poachers are destroying evidence as we speak. I need to document everything firsthand for the legal case. Before Benjamin could argue further, William approached, supporting a visibly weak but determined Oliver. He insisted on coming. William explained apologetically, wouldn't stay at the hospital. Oliver leaned heavily on a crutch, his face pale with pain but eyes burning with determination. I know this pack's movement patterns better than anyone. I can guide you to their likely locations, even in the dark. Dr. Peterson had followed them from the hospital, clearly frustrated. This is against medical advice. Mr. Turner needs bed rest, not a midnight excursion into the wilderness. With respect, Dr. Oliver replied, what I need is to prevent the destruction of years of research and the slaughter of an extraordinary pack of wolves. Mystic risked everything to save me. I won't abandon her now. Benjamin recognized the futility of arguing. Oliver stays at base camp with medical supervision. He can coordinate via radio, but he doesn't move into the search zone. The compromise reached the teams loaded into vehicles and headed toward the northern section of the park. 20 minutes later, they established a base camp at a ranger outpost, where Oliver settled into a chair with maps and radio equipment, his injured leg propped up. The pack has been centering their activities here, Oliver indicated, circling an area on the map. They moved their den after the first hunting incursions based on the tracks I documented last week. The new den is likely in this ravine system. Benjamin studied the location. That's rough terrain, especially at night. The poachers know that too, Oliver said grimly. They're counting on the difficulty to keep rangers away while they clean out their illegal operation. Benjamin divided the search zones, assigning Richard's team to the suspected den area. Remember, our priority is documenting and dismantling the illegal snares. If you encounter armed individuals, fall back and radio for sheriff backup. And if you spot wolves, maintain distance. They'll be especially skittish with all this human activity. As the teams moved out, Elizabeth lingered behind with Oliver. The siblings, 3-year estrangement hung between them like a physical presence. You shouldn't be here, Elizabeth said softly, adjusting the blanket William had placed over Oliver's legs. Neither should you, counselor, he replied with a weak smile. Your courtroom skills won't help much in the back country. I've hiked these mountains since I was 10. Remember, Dad made sure of that. She hesitated. I should have reached out Ollie before all this. Oliver's expression softened. We're both stubborn like our parents. Mom would laugh seeing us now. She always said we were too similar to get along. The tender moment was interrupted by a crackle from the radio. Julia's voice came through, tense. An urgent base. This is Team 1. We found 4 illegal snares already exactly where Oliver's photos indicated. They're nasty ones, modified to prevent release. Even if an animal struggles, documenting and dismantling. Now Oliver grabbed the radio. Any signs of the pack? Negative, but there's fresh wolf scat nearby. They've been through this area recently. As the night progressed, reports came in from all 3 teams. 17 illegal snares were located and disabled trail cameras mounted by the poachers, were discovered and confiscated. But the most disturbing find came just after 2 a.m. from Richard's team base. We found what appears to be the remains of a recent campsite near the suspected den area, fire still warm. They were here within the last few hours. Benjamin's voice responded from the field, any sign of the poachers themselves negative, but Richard's voice cut off. Suddenly, Richard, report Benjamin. Demanded after a tense moment, Richard's voice returned, hushed, and urgent movement detected approximately 200 yards northeast, multiple figures with flashlights moving quickly. And Ben, we just heard howls from the same direction. The pack is there at base camp. Oliver straightened, ignoring the pain flaring his broken leg. They pushed the pack right into the poachers' path. Elizabeth studied the map, quickly formulating a strategy. If the poachers are here, she pointed, and the wolves are being driven from their den, they'll follow this drainage. It's their only clear escape route, which makes it the perfect ambush point. Oliver concluded grimly. Benjamin's voice crackled to the radio again. All teams converge on these coordinates. Sheriff Campbell, we have confirmed poacher activity. Request immediate backup via next 30 minutes. Unfolded intense radio communications. As the ranger teams navigated the difficult terrain in darkness, Oliver monitored their movements on the map, his anxiety growing with each passing minute. The drainage narrows at this point, he told Elizabeth, pointing to a bottleneck on the map. If the poachers have positioned themselves there, a series of gunshots echoed in the distance. Cutting him off, Oliver grabbed the radio shots fired Benjamin there at the ravine bottleneck. Just as we suspected. Copy that, Benjamin replied, his voice tight. All teams moving with caution. Sheriff's units approached from the access road to cut off their escape. More gunshots followed, then confused shouting. Over the radio, Elizabeth paced a small cabin, her legal training at odds with her desire to be in the field. Helping Oliver sat motionless, his knuckles white around the radio, listening to the chaos unfolding. We got visual on 3 armed suspects. Julia reported they're firing into the ravine. The wolves, Oliver demanded. Can't confirm. 2 dark. The radio fell silent, except for sounds of movement. Enter coordination between the teams, and Benjamin's voice breathless. We've got Winters and 1 accomplice. Contained 3rd suspect fleeing. North. Sheriff's units in pursuit. A pause. Julia, get the wildlife vet up here. We have at least 1 injured wolf. Oliver's face drained of color. Mystic can't confirm identity yet. Adult female, gray coat, wounded but alive. Elizabeth squeezed her brother's shoulder as he bent forward with composure, finally breaking. After a moment, he straightened, wiping his eyes. I need to get up there. Oliver, you can barely walk. I don't care if it's Mystic. I might be the only one who can approach her without causing more stress. William, who had been quietly monitoring the situation, stepped forward. I'll drive you as close as possible, but you have to promise to be sensible about your limits. By the time Oliver arrived at the scene, supported between William and Elizabeth, dawn was breaking over the mountains. A soft light revealed a chaotic tableau. Rangers securing the area with yellow tape. Sheriff's deputies leading away a handcuffed George Winters and Martin Rodriguez, the wildlife veterinarian, bent over a still form on the ground. Benjamin met them at the perimeter. OL, you shouldn't be here, is it Mystic? Oliver demanded, ignoring the comment. Benjamin nodded solemnly. Gunshot wound to her left flank. Martin stabilizing her now with Williams' help. Oliver made his way to where the vet worked. The wolf lay on her side, breathing shallowly, even in the dim light, the distinctive scar over her right. I confirmed her identity. Martin looked up as they approached. Single shot through and through, he reported. Missed vital organs, but she's lost blood. I've administered antibiotics and fluids, but she needs surgery to clean the wound properly. Oliver lowered himself painfully to the ground beside Mystic, her amber eyes clouded with pain fixed on him. A soft whine escaped her throat. It's okay, girl, he murmured, voice thick with emotion. We're going to help you just like before. Remarkably, the injured wolf remained calm as Oliver gently stroked her head, a behavior that would be unthinkable with most wild wolves. Martin watched in amazement. I've never seen anything like this, he admitted. She should be trying to escape or showing aggression due to pain, but she's responding to him like she trusts him. Benjamin finished. Elizabeth observed the scene with tears in her eyes. All those years ago, he saved her, then she saved him, and now we save her again. Oliver said firmly. Martin, what's the plan? We need to transport her to a facility equipped for wildlife surgery. The sanctuary would be ideal, but it's over 3 hours away. William stepped forward. I've already called Megan at Wolfhaven. There, preparing the surgical suite. As they carefully moved Mystic onto a special transport stretcher, Benjamin pulled Elizabeth aside. Winters and his associate are in custody, but the 3rd poacher escaped. Sheriff's units lost him in the northern sector. What about evidence? We've documented everything. 23 illegal snares, 5 unauthorized trail cameras, shell casings, and a log book detailing their operation. They've been systematically targeting predators throughout the park for months, Elizabeth nodded her. Attorney Mind already building the case. This is more than enough for the emergency injunction I'll file as soon as courts open. The sky brightened as Mystic was loaded into a specialized wildlife transport vehicle. Benjamin watched as Oliver insisted on riding with her, his own pain clearly secondary to concern for the wolf. He really does have a remarkable connection with her, Julia commented, joining Benjamin. It goes beyond normal animal behavior. Benjamin agreed. The way she sought help specifically for him, and now how she responds to his presence despite her injury, it challenges everything we understand about wildlife cognition. As the transport prepared to depart for Wolf Haven, Richard approached with a troubled expression. "You need to see this," he said, leading Benjamin and Elizabeth to where the poachers had established their hideout inside a crude shelter built from branches and tarps. They found dozens of animal pelts, including several wolf hides, but more disturbing were the detailed maps and notebooks documenting not just wolf movements, but ranger patrol patterns as well. They knew our schedules, Benjamin realized. They knew exactly when areas would be unmonitored. And look at this, Richard said grimly, pointing to a specific page. It contained crude sketches of individual wolves, with one circled repeatedly, a wolf with a distinctive scar over its right eye. Next to it was written $15,000 Winter special client. Someone put a bounty specifically on Mystic. Elizabeth whispered, horrified. But why target her specifically? Benjamin wondered. Richard flipped to another page. Because she's the alpha female. According to their notes, they believe if they remove her, the pack will disperse, making the others easier to pick off. There's another reason, Elizabeth added, studying the papers. Look at the dates. This operation intensified 3 months ago, right after Oliver published his latest research paper on wolf cognition, featuring Mystic as a primary example. Someone wants to eliminate the evidence of her unusual abilities, Benjamin concluded, and with it a powerful argument for more comprehensive protection. Elizabeth agreed. As they continued examining the evidence, Sheriff Campbell approached. "We got a problem. Winters isn't talking, but his associate started singing as soon as we got him to the station. Says they're working for someone with deep pockets and political connections, someone who doesn't want enhanced wool protections interfering with development plans for the North Ridge, the timber proposal." Benjamin realized. The one that's been stalled because of potential impact on wolf territory. Exactly. And according to our chatty friend, there's more to this than just poaching. He claims their benefactor has been pressuring park officials to downplay predator populations in the environmental impact studies. Elizabeth's expression hardened. That would explain why the protection measures have been repeatedly delayed despite clear evidence of endangered species in the area. Who's behind it? Benjamin asked the sheriff. Lowered his voice. He didn't give a name, just said it's someone on the Regional Planning Commission, someone with investments in both timber and the resort development. I need to make some calls, Elizabeth said, already pulling out her phone. If we can connect this to corruption in the approval process, we can shut down the entire development at Wolf Haven Sanctuary. Mystic surgery proceeded while Oliver, despite his own pain and exhaustion, refused to leave the building. William stayed by his side. The two men united in their concern for the injured wolf. She's strong, William reassured him, and she has something to live for the pack, that, and something more. William smiled slightly. Some animals form bonds that transcend ordinary instinct. Oliver, what Mystic did seeking help specifically for you suggests a level of emotional memory we rarely acknowledge in wild animals. The veterinary surgeon emerged after 2 hours, her expression cautiously optimistic. We repaired the tissue damage and thoroughly cleaned the wound. No signs of infection. Yet she's young and healthy, which works in her favor. When can she return to the wild? Oliver asked. That depends on her recovery. Minimum of 3 weeks. Observation. The challenge will be keeping a wild wolf calm in captivity for that long. Oliver nodded thoughtfully. I'd like to stay involved in her rehabilitation, if possible. I thought you might say that, William replied. Your old cabin is still available. William continued. It needs some dusting, but the sanctuary would welcome your expertise, especially now. Oliver's expression revealed his gratitude. Thank you. As they spoke, Elizabeth arrived with Benjamin, and Sheriff Campbell. Her face showed the mixture of exhaustion and determination that had become familiar over the past 24 hours. How is she? Elizabeth asked, her professional demeanor softening as she saw her brother's distress. Out of surgery, prognosis cautiously optimistic. Elizabeth sat beside Oliver. We've made progress on the legal front. Judge Harmon has issued an emergency injunction prohibiting all hunting and development activities in the northern sector pending investigation. And the poachers, Sheriff Campbell stepped forward. Winters and his associate are in custody on multiple charges. Illegal hunting. using prohibited traps, trespassing in restricted areas, and now attempted bribery. Oliver raised an eyebrow. Winters tried to buy his way out, offer my deputy $10,000 to lose the evidence, added witness tampering to his growing list of charges. Benjamin joined the conversation. The evidence from their camp confirms they were specifically targeting Mystic's pack, with particular bounty on her. The motive appears linked to blocking the environmental protections that would interfere with the North Ridge development. Oliver's expression darkened. I've been documenting that connection for months. The timber and resort developers have been systematically working to eliminate evidence of endangered species in the project zone. We need your documentation, Elizabeth said. I'm filing expanded charges tomorrow morning, potentially including conspiracy and corruption. Oliver nodded toward his belongings. There's an external hard drive in my bag with everything backed up, 6 months of observations, recordings, photographs. I was planning to release it all next month in conjunction with the major Conservation Journal article. As they discussed, a case of soft wine came from the recovery room. Oliver immediately tensed, his focus shifting entirely to Mystic. She's waking up, the veterinary surgeon announced, emerging from the doorway, and she's agitated. Wild wolves typically react poorly to unfamiliar environments after anesthesia. Let me see her. Oliver requested. That's not protocol. Please. Oliver insisted. She knows me. It might help calm her. After a moment's hesitation, the surgeon relented. With William's assistance, Oliver made his way to the recovery area, where Mystic lay in a large, reinforced enclosure, her amber eyes now alert, fixed on him. Immediately, the low growl in her throat subsided as she recognized him. Hey, girl, Oliver said softly, settling himself on a stool beside the enclosure. Looks like we're both a little banged up. Remarkably, Mystic's tense posture relaxed. She maintained eye contact with Oliver, her intelligent gaze seemingly acknowledging their shared circumstance. I told you, Oliver said to the astonished veterinary staff. She remembers? Benjamin observed the interaction with wonder. Throughout his career as a ranger, he had maintained a professional distance from the wildlife. He protected, viewing their behavior through the lens of biological imperatives rather than emotional connections, but witnessing the unmistakable recognition between Oliver and Mystic challenges understanding. This changes everything we think we know about wolf cognition. He murmured to Elizabeth. It changes more than that, she replied. If we can document this level of intelligence and emotional memory in an endangered species, it strengthens every conservation case I've ever argued. Over the next several hours, as Oliver remained with Mystic, the others coordinated their efforts to build both the legal case and the conservation narrative around the events. Elizabeth worked the phones, rallying support from environmental organizations and preparing legal briefs. Benjamin coordinated with the Park Service to secure the evidence and establish enhanced monitoring of the pack's territory. By mid-afternoon, news of the poaching bust and the injured wolf had spread throughout Woodland Hills and beyond. Local all television stations ran special reports on the hero wolf who had both saved a man's life and now fought for her own. Social media buzz with the extraordinary story, bringing unexpected attention to the small town and its surrounding wilderness. Mayor Lawrence recognizing both the public relations opportunity and the genuine significance of the events, called Benjamin. The town council is convening an emergency session this evening. She explained, we, like you and the Turner siblings, to present a formal conservation proposal. This situation has created an opening for meaningful change in how we approach our relationship with the park and its wildlife. When Benjamin relayed this information, Elizabeth immediately grasped the strategic importance this is. Our chance to establish formal protections beyond the emergency injunction, she said. If we can get the town officially behind enhanced conservation measures, it creates political pressure on the county and state levels. Oliver, who had dozed off beside Mystic's enclosure, woke to this discussion. Despite his exhaustion and pain, his eyes sharpened with focus. I can't leave her, he said, nodding toward the sleeping wolf. You don't have to, William assured him. I'll stay with Mystic. This may be your only chance to present your research to an audience actually prepared to listen. As evening approached, Benjamin helped Oliver prepare his presentation, while Elizabeth drafted a comprehensive conservation proposal. The town hall filled beyond capacity, with residents spilling out onto the steps, drawn by the remarkable story that unfolded in their community. Mayor Lawrence opened the session with uncharacteristic emotion. Yesterday, many of us gathered in the same room with fear and suspicion. Today, we return with a deeper understanding of the extraordinary creatures with whom we share our wilderness. We've witnessed not only the remarkable intelligence of a wolf who sought human help, but also the courage of those who risked everything to protect these animals from illegal Hunting, when Oliver took the podium, supported by Benjamin, the room fell silent. His appearance, alone, pale, bandaged, clearly in pain, spoke volumes about his commitment 3 years ago. He began, I helped rehabilitate a wolf pup whose mother had been killed by poachers against conventional wisdom. I believed she could return to the wild, while maintaining the unique perspective her human interaction had given her. He paused, gathering strength. This week, that same wolf, now the alpha female of her pack, recognized me in my moment of need and deliberately sought human assistance, not through some mystical connection, but through demonstrable cognitive abilities that science is only beginning to understand. Using the evidence they had gathered, Oliver outlined not only Mystic's remarkable behavior, but also the broader importance of wolf populations to the ecosystem. Elizabeth followed with a clear presentation of the legal issues and proposed protections. Benjamin concluded by addressing the practical aspects of human-wildlife coexistence. We don't need to choose between human safety and wildlife protection. He emphasized with proper education boundaries and respect, we can preserve both. The council's vote was unanimous. Woodland Hills would formally petition for enhanced protection of the northern wilderness and establish a community-led conservation initiative. More significantly, they approved funding for an educational center focused on wolf ecology to be built near the park entrance. As the meeting concluded, Sheriff Campbell approached with news. We've identified the financial backer behind the poaching operation, he said quietly. Councilman Harold Jenkins from the Regional Planning Commission. He owned substantial stock in the timber company and was set to profit from the resort development. Do you have enough to arrest him? Elizabeth asked. We're executing search warrants tonight. But here's the interesting part. After news broke about the hero wolf, his partners started distancing themselves. Nobody wants to be associated with killing the wolf that saved a man's life. The public sentiment has completely shifted as they departed the town hall. Benjamin noticed a change in atmosphere. Citizens who have been calling for wolf control just yesterday were now asking how they could support conservation efforts. Local businesses had already put up posters featuring Mystic's story, and the school principal had approached about establishing wilderness education, music programs back at Wolf Haven. They found William dozing in a chair beside Mystic's enclosure. The wolf was awake, alert, her intelligent eyes following their movement as they entered. How is she? Oliver asked, making his way to the enclosure. Remarkably calm, William replied. The vets are astonished. Most wild wolves will be frantic in captivity, especially after trauma, but she's been peaceful as long as she can see the doorway, almost as if she's been waiting for your return. Oliver settled beside the enclosure, reaching his fingers through the mesh. Mystic approached, cautiously, still favoring her injured side, and gently pressed her muzzle against his hand. The council approved everything. He told William the protected status, the education center, even funding for expanded research on wolf cognition, the power of a good story. William mused, people protect what touches their hearts. As night fell over Wolf Haven, the Turner siblings found themselves alone by Mystic's enclosure. The wolf had settled into sleep, her breathing steady and strong. What happens when she's healed? Elizabeth asked softly. Will she be able to return her pack? That's the plan, Oliver replied. We'll monitor her recovery, then do a soft release in their territory. The pack should accept her back, especially as the alpha female. Elizabeth studied her brother's profile in the dim light. And you, what will you do? Oliver was silent for a moment. Continue my work. But differently now, this experience has shown me that isolation isn't the answer. Conservation needs multiple approaches: research, legal protection, community education. We were both right in our own ways. Mom and Dad would be proud. Elizabeth said, her voice thick with emotion. Not just what we've accomplished, but how their work continues through us, different methods, but the same heart. Outside the sanctuary, Benjamin stood under a canopy of stars, contemplating the extraordinary series of events that had unfolded from one wolf's impossible act of memory and compassion. In his years as a ranger, he had witnessed countless wonders of the natural world, but nothing had affected him as deeply as Mystic's deliberate seeking of help for the human, who had once helped her. The story was far from over. Mystic's recovery, the legal proceedings against the poachers and their financial backers, the implementation of the new conservation initiatives, all would unfold in the coming weeks and months. But something fundamental had shifted in the relationship between community and the wilderness that surrounded it. As Benjamin gazed toward the mountains where Mystic's pack continued their ancient rhythms of survival, he understood that the true miracle wasn't just a wolf remembering a human kindness, it was humans remembering their connection to the wild. Dawn broke over Wolf Haven. Sanctuary with golden light filtering through the pines. A week had passed since Mystic's surgery, and her recovery had progressed with remarkable speed. In the observation area, Oliver sat reviewing footage from the Sanctuary's monitoring cameras, his own healing evident in the improved color of his face and the ease with which he now moved with his crutches or wound. Is healing cleanly. Martin Rodriguez commented, joining Oliver with a clipboard of medical notes. No infection, good tissue regeneration. She's young and strong and motivated. Oliver added, nodding toward the footage where Mystic paced her enclosure routinely, pausing to look toward the hills visible in the distance. She wants to return to her pack. Martin studied the images with professional interest. I've worked with wildlife rehabilitation for 15 years, and I've never seen a wolf adapt to temporary captivity. Like this, no stress behaviors, no aggression toward handlers. She understands this is temporary, Oliver replied. That we're helping her. Martin raised an eyebrow. Most wildlife biologists would call that anthropomorphizing. Most wildlife biologists haven't spent 3 years documenting cognitive abilities in canids that defy conventional categories. Oliver counted, tapping his laptop, where charts and data points filled the screen. The research doesn't lie. Martin, wolves, particularly those with early positive human interaction, like Mystic, demonstrate reasoning capabilities far beyond what we've acknowledged. Their discussion was interrupted by Elizabeth's arrival. Her professional attire suggested she had come directly from court. The judge upheld our emergency injunction. She announced, without preamble, all development activities remain suspended pending the full investigation, and the timber company is already distancing itself from Jenkins, claiming they were unaware of his illegal activities. Of course they were, Oliver said with a wry smile. Plausible deniability is corporate standard practice. How's our star patient? Elizabeth asked, approaching the monitoring screen. Recovering ahead of schedule. Martin thinks she might be ready for release in 2 weeks instead of 3. That's excellent news. The educational impact of her story is already spreading beyond Woodland Hills. I've had calls from conservation groups across 3 states wanting to feature her in outreach materials. Oliver's expression grew cautious. I'm not interested in turning her into a publicity mascot, Lizzie. She's a wild animal, not a symbol. She could be both, Elizabeth argued gently. Her story is changing hearts and minds. The wolf that remembers narrative resonates with people who normally wouldn't give a second thought to predator conservation. Before Oliver could respond, William entered, carrying a tablet. You both need to see this, he said, his tone serious. Benjamin, just called the rest of Mystic's pack, has been located. The siblings gathered around the tablet as William pulled up a video Benjamin had sent from the field. The footage taken from a ridge overlooking a secluded valley showed 4 adult wolves and 2 sub-adults moving restlessly near a rocky outcropping. Their behavior, frequent scanning, reluctance to leave the area, regular howling, suggested distress. They're looking for her, Oliver said softly. The pack dynamics are disrupted with the alpha female missing. Benjamin's concern about the possibility of pack fragmentation. William explained, without Mystic's leadership, the social structure is unstable. Rangers have observed 2 of the younger males challenging each other repeatedly. Oliver studied the footage with growing concern. That the pack fragments, they become more vulnerable to other predators, to territorial disputes, even to starvation if they're hunting. Coordination breaks down. What does this mean for Mystic's release? Elizabeth asked. It complicates things, Martin admitted, reintroducing her too early risks, reopening her wound or causing infection, but waiting too long risks losing the pack structure. She needs to return to Oliver. Finished. The gravity of the situation settled over the room. Mystic's recovery had been proceeding smoothly, but the pack stability without her was deteriorating faster than anticipated. We need a compromise, Oliver finally said. A soft release approach. Move her to an enclosure within her pack's territory where they can reestablish visual and scent contact while she completes her healing. Martin frowned. That's risky from a medical perspective and logistically challenging. William added, building a secure temporary enclosure in the back country won't be easy, but it may be our only option. Elizabeth pointed out that the alternative is pack fragmentation. We need to try. The conversation was interrupted by a soft electronic tone from Elizabeth's tablet. The press conference is about to start, she said quickly, pulling up a live stream on the screen. Sheriff Campbell stood at a podium outside the county courthouse, flashbulbs popping as he addressed a crowd of reporters. Beside him stood Mayor Lawrence and several grim-faced county officials. This morning, we executed arrest warrants for Regional Planning Commissioner Harold Jenkins and 2 associates on charges of corruption, conspiracy, bribery, and violations of the Endangered Species Act. The sheriff announced, evidence seized from multiple Locations confirms that Commissioner Jenkins orchestrated and financed the illegal hunting operation targeting protected wolf populations in Evergreen National Park to camera panned. To show George Winters being led from the courthouse in handcuffs, his face hidden beneath the jacket. Winters has agreed to full cooperation with prosecutors. The sheriff continued. His testimony has already implicated additional parties involved in this conspiracy, and we anticipate further arrests. Mayor Lawrence stepped to the microphone next. In light of these developments, the Woodland Hills Town Council has unanimously voted to establish a wildlife protection fund and to partner with Wolf Haven Sanctuary on an educational initiative. We believe that our community's future prosperity lies in protecting, not exploiting, the natural wonders that make this region special. As the press conference continued, Oliver turned away from the screen, his expression troubled despite the positive developments. What's wrong? Elizabeth asked. This is a win. Ollie, politics and press conferences won't reunite Mystic with her pack. He replied, and that's what matters most right now, understanding her brother's priorities. Elizabeth switched topics. I spoke with Benjamin this morning about the soft release idea. He thinks we could use one of the old fire observation cabins in the northern sector as a base of the temporary enclosure. Oliver's focus immediately returned. Those cabins are right at the edge of the packs. Territory that could work. He turned to Martin. Would you sign off on moving her if we maintain full medical supervision at the release site? The veterinarian considered this with proper equipment and daily monitoring possibly, but I want another week of observation here first. That's reasonable. William agreed. It gives us time to prepare the site and build the enclosure with a tentative plan forming. Oliver asked to see Mystic. Martin escorted him to the recovery area where the wolf paced with increasing energy, her movement showing only slight stiffness from her healing wound. She's ready, Oliver said quietly, watching her alert response to his presence. She knows something's happening. 2 days later, Benjamin arrived at Wolf Haven to help coordinate the soft release plan. The ranger station office had become temporary headquarters for what the team now called Operation Homecoming. The cabin needs work, Benjamin reported, spreading maps across the planning table. It hasn't been used in years, but the structure is sound. We started clearing it and installing basic amenities. What about the enclosure? William asked. Richard and his team began construction. Yesterday, we're using reinforced fencing anchored into the bedrock. Where possible, it will give her about a /4 acre territory with good visibility of the surrounding area. Has there been any change in the pack's behavior, Oliver? Inquired. Benjamin's expression grew concerned. They're still in the vicinity, but increasingly scattered. The beta female seems to be trying to maintain cohesion, but she lacks Mystic's authority. Timeline is critical now, Oliver stressed. The longer they're disrupted, the harder reintegration becomes. Elizabeth, who had been making calls in the corner, joined the conversation. The Park Service has approved our special use permit. We're officially authorized to construct a temporary facility and conduct the soft release. Public sentiment has been a significant factor, Benjamin noted. The story has gone viral. The wolf who saved a human now being saved, and return donations are pouring in from across the country. Oliver, ever protective of Mystic's welfare above her symbolic value, steered a conversation back to practical matters. Martin wants another 5 days of observation. Can the enclosure be ready by then? We'll make it happen, Benjamin assured him. The Ranger Service is fully committed to this project. The following days passed in a flurry of activity at Wolf Haven. Martin and his team prepared Mystic for transport, conducting final medical assessments and acclimating her to the specialized crate that would carry her home. In the field, Ranger teams worked around the clock to complete the enclosure and observation blind, where researchers could monitor the pack's interaction without disturbing them. 5 days later, as dawn broke over the mountains, a small convoy departed Wolf Haven. Oliver, still using a crutch, but moving with greater confidence, rode in the lead vehicle with Martin and William behind them. A specially equipped transport contained Mystic in her crate, monitored by veterinary staff. Elizabeth and Benjamin followed in the final vehicle with equipment and supplies. The journey to the northern sector took nearly 3 hours, the last portion navigable only by four-wheel drive vehicles along rugged fire roads. When they finally reached the cabin, Abigail Warren, the young ranger trainee, greeted them with barely contained excitement. The pack was spotted less than a mile from here at dawn, she reported. They're definitely still in the area, and the enclosure is complete just as you specified. Oliver surveyed the setup with approval. The large enclosure extended from one side of the cabin, constructed of reinforced mesh high enough to prevent jumping and anchored deeply enough to prevent digging within the enclosure. The terrain had been left as natural as possible, with native vegetation, rock formations, and a small spring-fed pond. "This is excellent work," he told Benjamin. "She'll be comfortable here," while establishing contact with the pack, the most delicate phase of the operation. Transferring Mystic from the transport to the enclosure proceeded with methodical care. Martin, supervised as a sedated wolf, was carefully examined one final time, then placed in the enclosure, where she could recover from the mild sedation in safety. By mid-afternoon, Mystic had fully awakened and began exploring her new surroundings. Her behavior showed immediate improvement. The restlessness that had characterized her final days at the sanctuary replaced by focused attention on her environment, particularly the forested ridge visible beyond the enclosure fence. She knows where she is. Oliver observed from the cabin porch. She recognizes her territory. As if confirming his assessment, Mystic raised her head and released a long, penetrating howl that echoed across the valley. The sound hung in the air, a poignant announcement of her return. The team settled in for what they knew might be a waiting game. Benjamin and two rangers established a rotating observation schedule while Martin prepared equipment for continued medical monitoring. Elizabeth, who needed to return to Woodland Hills for court proceedings, reluctantly prepared to depart. "I hate to leave now," she told Oliver. "Just when things are getting interesting, you've done your part." He assured her the legal protections you've secured are just as important as the field work. Elizabeth studied her brother, noting how naturally he fit into this wilderness. "Saying you're going to stay up here, aren't you, even after Mystic is released for a while?" Oliver admitted. "I need to document the reintegration process. It's unprecedented research. That's a scientific justification," Elizabeth said with a knowing smile. "But it's more personal than that, isn't it?" Oliver didn't deny it. "She changed everything, Lizzie, not just for me, but for how we understand these animals. I need to see this through." As night fell, the team maintained a quiet vigil. Mystic had settled in a corner of the enclosure with clear views of both the cabin and the forest beyond. Her posture alert but calm. Periodically, she would stand, send the air, then release another howl into the darkness. Shortly after midnight, Benjamin, who had taken the first watch shift, burst into the cabin where the others dozed there responding. He whispered urgently. Everyone rushed to the observation blind through night vision equipment. They could see Mystic standing at attention, her ears, forward body, rigid with focus. From the distant ridge came the unmistakable sound of answering howls. Her pack had heard her calls. "How far?" Oliver asked. "Based on sound, about 2 miles out," Benjamin estimated, but moving closer for the rest of the night. The call and response continued intermittently. By dawn, the Rangers' tracking equipment detected wolf movement less than a mile from the enclosure. "They're coming," Oliver said, his voice thick with emotion. They heard her. As morning light spread across the valley, Martin performed a quick health check on Mystic, confirming that her wound remained clean and her stress levels measured through observational indicators were remarkably low. "She's ready for whatever comes next," the veterinarian concluded. What came next exceeded even their most optimistic expectations. Shortly before noon, movement at the forest edge caught everyone's attention. Through binoculars, they watched as a large male wolf, the pack's alpha, cautiously emerged from the trees, followed by 5 other wolves of various ages. Mystic immediately detected their presence, her entire body vibrating with focused energy. She moved to the edge of the enclosure closest to her approaching pack and released a distinctive greeting, howl different in tone and rhythm from her previous calls. The pack hesitated at the forest edge, clearly detecting human presence around the cabin, but the alpha male, after a brief assessment, led them cautiously forward until they reached the perimeter of the enclosure. What followed was a reunion that moved even the most scientific observers to emotion. Mystic and the alpha male touched noses to the fence, while other pack members circled, whining and pouring at the ground in clear recognition and agitation. "This is extraordinary," William murmured. "They recognize her despite her absence, and the wound sent. They know exactly who she is." "Family knows family," Oliver replied. Simply for the rest of the day, the pack remained near the enclosure, periodically approaching for contact before retreating to the safety of the forest edge. As darkness fell, they established a resting position within visual range, maintaining the connection their alpha female had re-established in the cabin. That evening, the team gathered to assess the remarkable developments and plan next steps. "The pack's response exceeds our best projections," Benjamin noted. "Their willingness to approach despite human presence suggests the bond with Mystic outweighs their natural caution." "How soon can we move to direct release?" Oliver asked. Martin, the D veterinarian, reviewed his medical data. "Her vitals are strong. Wound healing continues to progress. Well, if the pack's presence remains stable and her condition shows no regression, I could approve release in as little as 10 days. 10 days to document everything," Oliver amused already.